Good morning. We are so glad you're here today. It is October 31st, and that is a day where people normally wear a costume, so I came dressed like a preacher. Now, to many of you, that is scary. To me, it's kind of like, I'm dying up here. The tie may not make it past the first praise song. We'll just kind of see what happens. A couple of things, though, I want to call attention to as we begin our worship, some announcements to call. We are still part of our shoebox ministry, and we're going to see a little bit of video in just a second about that. But you have 2 weeks. It's not due till the 14th, but we have 2 more weeks to get our goal of 200. Fall Festival. We are having kind of our own little small fall festival, but we are doing it next Sunday afternoon. But we would appreciate that tomorrow when you go to the store and the candy aisle has everything half price, all right, that you would just grab a bag or two, bring it on up, and it's going to be a great day. We have, I understand the fire truck is supposed to be here. We got some bouncy houses, cakewalks, a lot of different things, hayride, some fun stuff next Sunday afternoon, and we announced that as well last week. Third, we have exceeded our state mission offering goal. So I thank you, and we just give God the glory at that. Our goal was 2,500, and we've gone over that toward directly impacting the Southern Baptist of Virginia group that we are part of, and some great ministries that they do, as we talked about that in weeks past. And then lastly, we have one more offering we're going to be taking today. Some of you may have already given through your Sunday school class or through your regular offering, but we, at the end of the service today, we will have at the back 2 of our ushers and deacons with offering plates where we're going to take an offering and remind me to have a prayer time for the Esch family. The Esch family was the Amish family of 8 children whose parents were killed in an automobile accident, and and God has been blessing many as they've been giving, and I know that, but I know so many here want to also be part of. Here's somebody from not too far from our community where we can have an expression of our love for the family. So I just continue to ask you to pray for them, and today we will do a love offering, and that offering will be delivered to them directly. If you're going to write a check, write it out to the church, not to the Esch family, but to the church. Also, I've already mentioned the candy already, and so I do encourage you to get that. Now, as our praise team makes their way up, the best way I can kind of talk about our shoe boxes is let's watch a short video. If you're not familiar with, this will give you a great introduction as well as a little bit more about how your gift and through a shoebox can impact people all around the world.
The joy of seeing a child open the boxes for the first time is it's incredible.
There's squeals and screams, and they're so excited to see what's inside their box.
Oh my goodness!
Every shoebox gift represents the love of God to them. We are so excited. Many of the children receive the shoebox for the first time in their life.
We're here with Operation Christmas Child. The kids are so excited. We had the opportunity to hand out some of the boxes. There's so much joy, so much happiness, and it gives us an opportunity to present the gospel. We pray that these boxes will be used to bring a lot of happiness and joy, but more importantly, the gospel to each heart, all these little children around the world.
What a great gift. I get a present, I get to know who Jesus is, but not only that, I get to be discipled in his ways.
Hundreds of thousands of volunteers work with Operation Christmas Child every year, preparing these boxes, praying for the boxes, that God will use them in a mighty way for his glory.
This little shoebox has the opportunity to change the world. Not only are they going to get a shoebox, they're going to get the love and the message of Jesus Christ.
Some go by helicopter, some go by ship, some go by camel, donkeys, canoes. We go at great lengths to take these boxes to children in the most remote parts of the world, and it's an incredible journey.
After these children open the box, they have the opportunity to go through the greatest journey, the 12-lesson discipleship program, where they get to learn more about Jesus Christ.
Right now, I'm right outside of Mazatlan, Mexico, about 6-hour drive up in the mountains. This is an indigenous people group, people that never heard the gospel before. The kids and the families that accepted Christ, almost 100 altogether, have now started a church.
Hemos visto una experiencia preciosa, grande, ¿verdad?, en el pueblo. Y ese pueblo va a ser el medio para llevar el Evangelio a otro lugar. Que estas bendiciones que son de las cajitas sigan llegando hacia arriba y a la montaña.
This shoebox gives us an opportunity to continue to shine the bright light of the gospel in the darkest and remote places around the world.
We're seeing families come to know Jesus. Churches are sprouting up in these communities. These children are rising up to be disciples in their own country.
The gift box and the gospel of Jesus Christ bring hope to our children, to bring the smiles back on their faces.
No greater need and no greater time than right now for us to go out and serve boldly. This is what these shoe boxes are all about, to go out and to bring the hope of Jesus Christ around the world.
I'm just so amazed at what God does each and every year. This is an opportunity to impact the lives of millions of children, just like you've seen. But we need more boxes for next year. Every box is an opportunity for us to share the gospel of Jesus Christ. So thank you, and God bless each and every one.
The glory Christ the Lord.
Love, God's message of hope, reaches around the world in some places that can't be reached any other way. Maybe your one shoebox might be the instrument to change a life for eternity. That's what it's all about. So we're going to be dedicating those and praying over those, but you got 2 more weeks. That's 14 days. That's a box a day. Okay, maybe not a box a day, but get it out there and let's get back and let's do 200. Let us stand, and I want us to acknowledge the fact that we are here for God. And we have a call to worship from the Psalms, and I'm going to be reading it. So let's start that video, and this will introduce our theme that God is with us no matter what is going on. Lord, we pray this morning for to make yourself known. Though my enemies are many, you will protect me. You are my shield, my guard, one who lifts my head high. seated for just a minute. We're going to have a time of prayer. Felt it was necessary. Today, the text is we walk through the valley of shadow of death. We walk through the deep, dark valleys. And I know that there are so many people right now going through stuff that is a storm. But we need to remember that our God is a God who goes before us. Our God is a God that is right beside us. Our God is there through the storm. He doesn't deliver and take away the storm. He gives us the stability and the anchor to get through the storm. So I want you to look around, not in a creepy way, but you need to know that there are people around you that are struggling. There are people around you that are going through some deep, dark valleys and storms that it seems like earthly made, we can't get through it on our own. So I want us just to lift each other up. Would you bow your heads? I just want us to, whomever the Lord is laying upon your heart, I ask that you would pray for them. Maybe they're not even here. Maybe they're not here because life has got them down. They're watching online and they can't get to church, or they're quarantined, or they're struggling and it just seems so frozen. But God, you are a bigger and better God than anything. There is no storm too big for you. There is no dark valley that your light doesn't shine. So God, I ask right now that we take our eyes off the storm and put our eyes back on the Savior. I ask that each one of us would encourage our brothers and sisters as we're walking through these life journeys together. We are not alone. Not only are you with us, but we are together with the family of God, and we need each other to lift each other up, to walk beside us, and to let us know we'll get through it. So God, right now, may remind us that you are that solid rock in a world that is shifting and sinking and stormy. And on that solid rock I stand. All other ground is sinking sand. So God, may my eyes be upon you. And all God's people said, amen. Would you stand as we sing that song, The Solid Rock?
Built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. I dare not trust the sweetest friend, but wholly lean on Jesus' name, on Christ the
Amen. Amen. You may be seated. Kids, hang out for just a minute because we're going to do, I got a video this week that is a little fun, and then we're going to do a short interview. So as we watch this video, I've got a special guest that's going to share a little bit as well. So start the video, and then Dalton. Did y'all enjoy that? All right. Are you going to let your daughter mutton bustin'?
I guess, yeah. Yeah, if she wants to.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, when I'm talking, excuse
right?
me, hold it. I got to get. I'm talking to Dalton. You're going to let your. I'm going. I sound like Elvis Presley when I do that. So, Dennis, kind of turn the bass up really loud on me, so I kind of sound like him. Can you do that? All right, kids, y'all hang out for about 5 minutes. I want to do an interview. All right, first of all, let me ask you a question. I got some questions I'm going to put forth, but somebody didn't ask you. One, do you want to go by Dalton, Shepherd, Rancher, what? Dalton's fine.
Just call me late for dinner, right?
Just call you later? Okay. Do you eat lamb chop?
I do. Monica can't stand the smell, so.
You have to cook it outside?
Yeah, I thought I'd slip into a chili one time, and she was gone. She was at work, and
she smelled it from work?
She walked in the house. She said, "There's lamb in that, isn't it?" Yeah.
All right. First of all, I got a couple things, but give me just general, what's it like to you to be one that raises sheep? That wasn't a question, but it's kind of, just generally kind of start us off. Give us some general introduction thoughts of what it means to raise sheep. And you can tell a story, you can do whatever.
I mean, for the most part, a lot of us, well, I have cattle, and that's what I spend my day doing, and then in the afternoon I go tend my sheep, and do that in the morning sometimes too, but I think it's something, like it's people don't understand it around here, so you're a little misunderstood, and you're like, oh, what are you doing with those sheep, and people just don't have a great understanding of it, so it's hard to really be like, look, I do the things that sheep need to be done for them, you know.
Okay. How many sheep do you have?
All of them. Too many according to Monica.
All of them.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're running about 50, 60 ewes right now.
Now, I saw early on, y'all got married before I got here, I believe. 4 and 3 years? How long y'all been married?
3 years.
I didn't ask that, but you should know it. Y'all actually spent some nights, like date nights, in with the sheep. I mean, come on.
And during lambing season, you kind of live with them. You have to be very close to the sheep. You have to be in them all the time.
All right. So some of the questions I have is this. What are some of the tools of the trade for shepherding? What are some of the things that you use in your shepherding?
So most of the tools that I have are related to lambing. So some of those are appropriate for church and some aren't.
Let's keep this rated PG because I don't want YouTube to filter this completely out.
But for the most part, shepherding's a hands-on thing.
Okay.
You get your hands on a sheep, and if you've ever been around sheep, if you grab a sheep under its chin, it kind of puts it in neutral. So if a shepherd has a staff, they're trying to just get close enough to that sheep to get their hands on it.
Do you have a staff?
I don't. I have a pin that lets me get close enough.
Okay. Okay.
So, but as it pertains to this verse, the staff comfort me. If a shepherd's trying to get his hands on a sheep, it's because there's something that he needs to work on.
Okay. Yeah, it is. The staff is, I draw them close, I get them out of the ditch, I direct them, I'll take the young lamb back to the mother ewe. So it is kind of a guiding, comforting, directing the staff. All right.
It's not very they're going to try to get away from it, but you're trying to get your hands on them. And like I say, if God's trying to get his hands on you, you might struggle a little bit too.
Do y'all struggle? No, I'm just raise your hand if you've ever struggled against God. Okay, every one of you, raise your hand. That's got it. All right. What is the biggest danger to your flock besides your wife?
Interestingly enough, it's not wolves or bears or coyotes. I've had two different instances where I had a dog attack, and that wasn't a big deal. But I've lost far and away, and probably most people east of Montana have lost way more sheep than parasites.
Okay.
It's a tiny little thing that you think couldn't take down a big animal.
Oh, they do, yeah.
And so
And that's coming in a couple of weeks, so get ready. We're going to put them in, anoint our head with oil is about taking care of the parasites. So little segue, but moving on. So little bitty things that kind of is the biggest danger. Back to the tools, I forgot to mention. One of the things, we mentioned staff, but one of the things about the rod, a rod is kind of like a 2.5 foot beating stick. It's a defensive weapon. It wasn't used on sheep. They didn't beat or discipline. But one of the things I read about was either the rod or the slingshot, that they would throw the rod to land behind the sheep. So like this little sheep is not staying up. And so you throw it behind it because then it would scare the sheep to get back to where they're supposed to be. What do you do to scare your sheep?
They're pretty skittish. You just you come around the corner, they'll spook. Going off the trail, you clap your hands and scream.
Okay. But I mean, sometimes that makes them run the other way, right? How do you get them to you? How do you get them to come to you?
Call.
And do they answer to you?
They will answer, yeah.
Okay.
They answer to Kennedy too.
Oh, but not your wife.
Well, I don't. Have you ever called sheep?
Don't get you involved in this, right? So if parasites, you said you had a couple of wild dogs attack, and I get that. How do you protect your flock, both for the parasites, but also for the predators?
Well, when I bought my place, the first thing I did was I built a good fence.
Okay.
And put up a good fence. Right?
Good. Excellent. Yeah.
So a good fence keeps out everything not everything, but it keeps out most of the things that I have an issue with. And then for the parasites, you just have to watch them. You have to be in your sheep constantly. Monica thinks it's less than I do. I'm probably in my sheep 4 or 5 days a week, at least. And you got to see them, otherwise, a little problem becomes a big problem.
Okay.
You can't just go by and say, "Oh, she looks like she might be sick. I'll do something tomorrow." Better do it today.
So when you see something, you handle it right away.
Exactly.
Do you have any help besides, Kennedy, obviously? Do you have a sheep dog, or do you have any dogs that kind of?
I have a sheep dog, but it's really good at keeping squirrels out of the yard. I was training her. This is before Monica. One day she just was chasing a set of sheep, and I was hollering. I had a shock collar on her, and I hit the button, and she tensed up and rolled over, and got up, took running again. And I said, "This isn't good. Let's just quit this right here."
So your sheepdog became more of a pet.
She is a pet.
Okay. You said you had what is one of the most interesting stories, and I'm leading you up to say whatever you want here. What's one of the most interesting stories you've got as far as shepherding, as far as your sheep and the flock and what you've done?
Well, like this spring.
Funny or serious, doesn't really matter.
This spring, before I was ready to turn sheep out, I had them close to the barn there. And I have a woven wire fence which has boxes of wire.
Okay.
And sheep's head's made kind of like that, which is a really nice wedge. And so so they can get their head in that they can get it in that wire but not out very well. So I had one ewe in particular that kept putting her head in the fence. And
Was that the one you made chili out of?
no. No, so she just kept doing it, and I'd go in the morning and I'd get her out. In the afternoon I'd get her out. But one day it hit me. I saw her one afternoon, and I go across the fence and I say, "You are the stupidest sheep alive. You are serious. This has been 10 days or so, and I've gotten you out every morning." And I got up closer to her and I realized she had her head stuck in the exact same hole that she had that morning. I was like, "You have your head stuck in the exact same spot. You learned nothing from this morning." And I was angry. And I said, "I ought to let you just sit there and die." And it hit me. And I realized that I'd been that sheep.
Well, that kind of took a turn right there at the end. But it is a great lesson, because that was one of the things I was going to ask, and I'll get to the last question. But what about your relationship with God have you learned from your role as shepherding? That was one you mentioned already.
It's kind of, I mean, it's unsettling when you're like, this is such a stupid animal. You know, you feel like you make so many mistakes that you could easily avoid, and then you liken yourself to that.
Yeah.
And you're like, ooh, that's not good.
But you stick it out because you love the sheep.
Yeah, exactly. There's a you know, everybody talks about, it's difficult, it's not fun, da-da-da-da-da. Even us shepherds, when we get together, we bellyache about, well, you'll never believe, I had a ewe do this the other day. I had one get stuck in a ditch, but nobody talks about, like, in the spring of the year when lambs running around, like, they'll do this thing where they go around, when the mothers are eating, they'll do this thing where they'll start a race, one of them will run, and then they'll all be running.
It's cool, yeah.
Just turn the bucket over and sit and watch it. It's fun.
I watched several YouTubes about from drone shots of sheep moving. It's really a pretty cool shot. My last question, and then I'll give you one, whatever you want to say last, is do you learn any similarities between shepherding and parenting?
Other than caring for something that is somewhat helpless and cleaning up poop?
That's part of it.
No, I think the really big part of it is the joy that you get from it. I mean, I enjoy being a shepherd. I really enjoy being a father.
But you can't, as a father, you mentioned several things already. You can't, if you see something, you can't leave it with the sheep. You've got to handle it. And the same thing with parenting. You cannot let things fester. You cannot let things get a foothold into your kids' lives. That's a powerful lesson.
You have to show up every day.
You got to show up almost every day. Any last words? Any last thing you want to say to challenge? Okay. Think you got it. Let's give him a hand. Thank you. All right, kids, thank you for staying for that. Hope you enjoyed it. Y'all can go to Children's Church. Dalton, thank you again. Dalton has been y'all don't know this, but every Sunday as I'm sharing, especially the cultural aspect of sheep, I watch him. Sometimes he's going, you know, and his wife just keeps that blank look on her face. Can we talk about something else? That's kind of what she keeps saying. But it's a good thing to know, and shepherding is not something that has changed in 2,000, 3,000 years. Sheep are still hopeless and helpless and cute as all get out. Okay? Matter of fact, the first slide, go to my PowerPoint. The first slide was supposed to be showing while he played. But Donald, is one about there it is. Was that on the screen earlier? That was supposed to be while you were up there. And I wanted to get a picture of Kennedy in a sheep costume, but just so you know. All right, Psalm 23 is more than just the psalm verse that we've learned and that you hear at funerals. It is more than just this verse that comforts us, though it does that. It's also a verse of real, raw reality. And the first thing I want to share with you is that the world is a scary place. It is. 30 some odd years ago, when Lisa and I were thinking about having children, she wanted 18, and I wanted one. I don't want. We had one and thought it was the perfect one, so we stopped. Okay, that's kind of the way it happened. But the world is a scary place, and I found this picture as a background and you can't really see it, but kind of around, if you're looking at the screen, about at 6 o'clock, right there near the dark spot, there's a little red dot. Some of y'all see good enough to see that little red dot? I need a laser pointer. Right there at part of the cave meets the wall where the trail, and what that little red dot is the person. Now, you can't see it, that's okay, because in life, it seems that the darkness and the scariness overwhelms us way too often. And here you are coming from verse 3, where he leads us in paths of righteousness, and the next thing you know, you're in the valley of shadow of death. Now, first of all, let me kind of give you this point. It does not, in the Hebrew, does not say the valley of the shadow of death. It's okay, it gets you the point across. The Hebrew is you're in a valley of deep darkness, a death-like darkness. It is, and we imagine death as something black. The pit is something that, no light, and there's nothing. And so it is this, you're in a valley of deep darkness. And as every time I was going to play the song Thriller, okay, because that's what kept coming into my head, that it's this scary moment, and we think we're walking through life through the righteous paths that God leads us, but all of a sudden, next thing you know, we're being hit by a storm. We're being hit by a health crisis. We're being hit by all this. So in this point, what I want to share with you, first, the cultural aspect of the shepherd, is that there are times that the sheep will find themselves in a valley of deep darkness. Now, how they got there, in the words of our presidential press secretary, we'll circle back to that, okay? But what we're going to say is, I don't care right now how you got there. The point is we're going to find ourselves there. And as a sheep, you're in these places. Now, let me give you 3 quick slides of pictures. This is called the Dry Canyon. These are actually from the Judean desert and the wildernesses. And what would happen is the shepherd, the further you get into summer, they would take longer and longer treks, and they would follow the snow line as it melts up the mountainside. In those summer months, you would be further and further away from home. And as winter comes around, they would bring you back down, back into the ranch, back into close one, so the shepherd could sleep back in the house at night. All right? Hire other people to stay out there in the cold. So they're up in these mountains, and as you make your way up to we're going to see in a few weeks about he prepares a table, and we see these other things. You're going to march through some pretty desperate, dark places. This is one called the Dry Canyon. Some of the things is you're going to walk through these canyons, and there's not going to be any water. There's not going to be any supplies. And it is a point, the further you get from home, the further you get from your normal comfort zone, the harsher it's going to be, and the more dangerous it's going to be. There might not be any water. The next one is called the Narrow Canyon, and you might walk along on the side there, or you might actually go down into the canyon where there is kind of a creek. And interestingly, his number one death was in part, parasites was what Dalton talked about. In these canyons, actually one of the more dangerous things, you had predators, you had, coyote, you had wolves, and you had all these different animals that might prey and hide in the canyon walls to come down on you. But one of the things they had to be very, very cautious of was flash floods. And it may not have rained anywhere near you. It might have rained miles and miles away. It might have been a storm somewhere you never even saw. But because of that, the snow melts, the flooding starts, and you're in this canyon, and all of a sudden a flood comes through, and you have nowhere to go. This is why it's so important to have a good shepherd, as Jeremiah talks, that has understanding and knowledge of what's going on. One more picture of another canyon in the Judean desert is this. It's called the Red Canyon. It's really kind of cool. It's almost like Moabish, if you've ever been there, down in Canyonlands, where you can walk down there between these great canyons, and it's beautiful. I hiked once Gunnison National Park, and they had a valley that was so steep and so dangerous that they only allowed 16 people a day to get on it. And they told you, let us know when you get back up, because we're not coming to look for you. There is no rescue. And the next morning, they pull out, okay, David Detweiler made it back. If you didn't make it back, they would decide, do we come look for you, or do we just kind of let him stay there? And I did this, and it was in the snow about a year ago. But it only had sunlight basically from like 10 to 1. It was so narrow and so steep, there were times you had to go down the mountainside holding a chain just to go down. And it got dark early. So imagine you're going through these, but you got to get down there to get to the water. You got to go through these dark valleys, these times of depths of darkness, and it is real in these lives. So what I want to talk about today is this. First, dark valleys are undesirable. Okay? Yea, though I walk, it says here in Psalm 23, verse 4. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Dark valleys are not desirable. Most of us want to spend time on the mountaintop. We want to get up there where the fields are lush, or down in the valleys where, safe from the storms. But there are times that we go through dark valleys. As a sheep, it would be as you're being following. Okay, and we're going to get how he gets there in a minute, but as you're going up there to get to where the shepherd wants you to be, but you don't really want to be in that scared place. Right? You're vulnerable not only to rock slides and flash floods and predators, but you're also vulnerable. It could be easily get cold. The sun would set, the darkness would set in, and or like the dry valley, dehydration or lack of actual vegetation, so hunger. Valleys are not good places. As a shepherd, they know that. But I want to talk about us. You have a health issue, you have pains, you have hurts, you have betrayals, you have brokenness, you have broken dreams, you have betrayals. You have just things happen in our lives that are just harsh. You may feel empty. My mother in her loneliness and depression. You have fears. You know you're vulnerable. Basically, it comes down to two big words. You feel helpless and you feel hopeless. And I want to share, if you're not going through a valley, don't desire it. None of us really want that. But the problem is, it's unavoidable. The reality is, it's unavoidable. Some translations say, yea, though I walk. The Hebrew there is moreover, or also, I will eventually end up walking through a valley. Okay? It is unavoidable. It's going to happen to you. It may be happening to you right now. A loss of a loved one. Just this morning, on our app, we actually have a church app, but one of our members wrote about, and I just throw this out here, and they say it can be made public, but Dana Beckhouse, her family facing cancer. This is a new prayer request. Facing cancer, and it's that they would have, as they go through this, and I reword this, that as they go through their dark valley, that God would give them strength. So it might be a health issue, it might be a rebellious child, it might just be work is overwhelming, your marriage might be crumbling. People, dark valleys are undesirable, but they are unavoidable. Now, I said I'd circle back to this. Why are we in dark valley? Sometimes you're in a dark valley because God led you there. Okay? I'm walking through the paths of righteousness, and the shepherd is walking in front of us. And that is very important. He's with us no matter what, but I want you to get this. We're going through tough times because God got us here. W.A. Criswell says, God will sometimes send revival to a church through reduction. God, like he said, sometimes God will get into our face and show his grace, his love, his mercy, but also, I think he also shows I'm disappointed. Now, we never catch him off guard. It's not like, oh, I didn't see that coming. But it's the point of he desires. Jesus wept over the city of Jerusalem. There are times that we have to go through certain things to get us to where we need to be. These shoe boxes are not easy. I cannot imagine the millions and millions of shoeboxes and all the logistics that have to go through, we struggle to get 200. Imagine the 200 million that have to get out from the ports in America that right now are just like traffic in Washington, D.C. And all the logistics that have to go with that, all the things you have to do in hundreds of different countries. It's tough, but we go through it because God says, because there's one child that needs to get that box. And this is how I'm going to reach that child. So it might be that type of scenario, and God is leading us through those things, and he's leading through those tough times because he knows where he's taking us. Sometimes, though, we're in the dark valleys because we're being foolish. I'm not talking about rebellion. That's the third thing. Sometimes we're there because we rebel. We shake our fist at God and says, I'm not going to go that way. I'm going to go this way. I'm not going to follow what you want. I'm going to do what I want. And sometimes we're in that dark valley because, hey, we put ourselves there shaking our fist at God. Sometimes we're just foolish. Let me give you some examples. You have a health issue you're going through because you've ignored the warning signs for years. You have kids that are being rebellion because you did not take the time to raise them in Christ's likeness. You have finances that how did I ever get in this way? Because you did not practice godly stewardship. There are warning signs all along the way, and sometimes we ignore those things. And we just kind of chew and mull, and now we're not doing it out of spite. We just don't pay attention. And I get it. Here's my dark valley. My clothes keep shrinking. Okay? But there are warning signs. Like that dessert section on the menu every time I go out to eat. So I've got to start saying no. See what I'm saying? We might be there because we know we're following God's, but that doesn't mean an easy time. We might be there because we're foolish, and that's okay. I mean, that happens. Or we might be there because we're rebelling. It's going to happen. It's undesirable, but it's unavoidable. But I also want you to know it's temporary. Yea, though I walk through the deep, dark valley. It's not yea that I'm stuck in the deep, dark valley. It's not yea that I'm trapped in the deep, dark valley. I'm walking through the deep, dark valley. The light at the end of the tunnel may be you getting to heaven. But it also might be you get through this and you're going to be stronger. One of the darkest times in the life of Lisa and me was early in our marriage when we lost our first child. And it's one of those things that we know how dark that can be, but you don't know it until you've gone through it. But you know, and I'm not sharing anything that Lisa has not shared publicly, so I'm not doing this. And this is not in my notes, so forgive me, Lisa, I didn't warn you. But she became depressed. She became hurt. She became angry. And Lisa talks so much that I didn't know it for months. Literally. But she came through that through godly mentorship, through work, through books such as Stormia Martin, other great writers that are out there. And God got her through it. But because of that, she went through that dark valley. And I truly believe this, that we are sometimes go through dark valleys so that we can turn around and help others that are going through similar dark valleys. Don't believe me? Paul says in Corinthians, God comforts us so that we can comfort others. Valleys are undesirable, valleys are unavoidable, but valleys are temporary. The question isn't about when are valleys happening. They're going to happen. The question isn't about how dark the valley is going to be, because we don't know. The question is, how will you face it? How will you handle the dark valley? I am not known for my compassion. I've been told I should not counsel people. Sometimes, especially. I've just been told, you're too blunt, Todd. I've grown in grace as I've grown up. I'm kinder. someone wanted to give me the T-shirt. Sarcasm is my hugging. That's my ministry of, however it's said. But I found a TV commercial once that just showed me how I think I should treat every person that is going through a dark time. And this is how I think. Some of you whine and bicker and complain that you just need a little tough love. So let me show you this commercial.
Could switching to Geico really save you 15% or more on car insurance? Does a former drill sergeant make a terrible therapist?
And that's why yellow makes me sad, I think.
That's interesting. You know what makes me sad? You do! Maybe we should chug on over to Mamby-Pamby land where maybe we can find some self-confidence for you, you jackwagon! Tissue? Cry, baby.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more.
So if you want to set up a counseling session with me, you're forewarned right now, okay? Just letting you know. Fortunately, most churches I've been at, we had a former retired pastor, and I would always tell him, go to that guy. He will hug you and love you and care for you. I'll love you, but I will also get in your face and say, get out of the stupid fence. Okay? But how will you face it? And I'm not trying to sit here and say the dark valleys aren't serious. Because we've got some people going through. I've showed one person that video clip. I said, and she goes, that is not appropriate. But it is you. I think this psalmist shows us how to handle it. And I want to share with you straight from the scripture. Number one, we are to refuse to lose heart. Yea, or even though, or moreover, or whenever you walk through the valley of deep darkness, the valley of the shadow of death. I want you to get this. I will not fear. It's by refusing. I want you to say, the verb there is a verb where you have to make a constant decision. I will not. I will not lose fear. I will not lose heart. I will not fear. I'm not going to be afraid no matter what I'm going through. It may be overwhelming. One of the great passages that we're looking on Sunday night is Isaiah 43. And it says this concept that though the river is all around me, my Lord is with me. He has called me. He knows me by name. So the first thing, if you're in a dark valley, how do you handle it? You do it by refusing to lose heart. I choose to know something is greater and stronger and more powerful than the darkness that I'm going through. I choose to say, this is shadows. This is a mist. These things cannot harm me. Now, I say that, yes. Some people said it's valley of the shadow of death and shadows can't hurt you. I get that. And ultimately, nothing can hurt us beyond what God allows. And still, He's there. He's never going to hurt. We have to keep that eternal in mind. But we keep the eternal in mind saying, look, I may lose the battle to cancer, but I'm not going to lose my heart in trusting God. Because the battle to cancer is not the war. The war has already been won at Calvary. I will not lose heart because I have a good shepherd. And yes, even if I'm in this dark valley out of my own foolishness, I have a shepherd that is going to come find me and going to pull me home. See that in Luke 15, the parable of the lost sheep. We have a good shepherd that never loses. And as it says in scriptures, that we are in the Father's hand and no one can take us out. Don't lose heart. Remember, matter of fact, in that Isaiah 43 passage where we are sharing on Sunday nights, it is this point that Isaiah is writing. You're getting ready to go into captivity. And it's going to be 70 dark years. Jeremiah tells us the 70. It's going to be 70 dark years, but you need to know this. I'm going back to, remember Egypt? Isaiah is telling them, you remember Egypt where God was there? He delivered you through the rivers. He delivered you through the waters. God delivered you from Pharaoh. Just like He delivered you there, He will deliver you here. I will not lose heart. Because I'm not focusing on the dark valley. I'm focusing on the Savior. So it's a matter of choice. I will not. I choose how I face it. I will not fear. Jesus, as He was getting ready to go to the cross, told His disciples, fear not, for I leave you peace. Not peace like the world gives, but something beyond this world. Or as the psalmist says this in Psalm 56, 3 and 4, when I am afraid, I put my trust in you, God, whose word I praise. In God I trust. I shall not be afraid. What can flesh do to me? And we remember that this is about an eternal journey with God. There's nothing on this world that should scare us if we know we are following the Savior. I will not lose heart. So I refuse to lose heart. The second thing I want us to see is this, is that we should remember his presence. Why do we not lose heart? Because God is with us. Now, here it is. Psalms 23 pivots. It's like the first 3 verses, David is telling people, let me tell you about my God. Let me tell you about my God. He is my shepherd. He is the good shepherd. He leads me. He finds green pastures. He finds still water. Let me tell you about my God. He is so great. But here, when life starts to really get hard, the deep, dark valley, he says, wait a minute, it's not me talking to anybody else. It pivots. And now the psalmist talks directly to God. He doesn't say, I will fear no evil because he is with me. What does he say? I will fear no evil because what? You are with me. We often miss this. We just kind of read through it. No, it is a great pivot point. It is everything in these deep, dark valleys should pivot on this truth. Not about his protection, not about his provisions, not about what we're going through. It all pivots on this one foundational truth. God is with me. It is his presence, which is why Jesus said in Matthew 28, why Jesus says elsewhere, I will not leave you nor forsake you. And this presence is huge. Though thousands fall beside me, though my family and friends are not by my side, though death himself stare me in the face and wave his scythe at me, I will not quiver, I will not tremble, I will not fear, for I am not alone. No matter what you're going through, if nothing else this morning, you need to know that. You are not alone. But now thus saith the Lord, Isaiah 43, he who created you, he who formed you, O Jacob, O Israel, fear not, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by name. You are mine. And when you pass through the waters, I am with you. And then lastly, the third R is this: rely on his provision. His presence is enough, but he has provisions. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. And we've kind of shared that already. The staff is that hook where he grabs and directs and brings out. And they used a belt to bring that sheep out into there. But, if you had and every shepherd had their own, staff where that's what they used to help direct and to bring a baby lamb back to its mother. All these different things. But the rod was a very defensive weapon. But it was also for discipline, not where they beat him. It's not where you spare the rod. Totally different thing there, okay? But it's where it talks about you would pass under the rod. And every night, as he counts, there'll be a rod, and we pass on a rod. And every sheep would be inspected by the shepherd for parasites, as we see, have heard already, for wounds, for whatever. And then that sheep would go on in. It's where the tender hands just calmly and lovingly, as he passes under that rod. The rod is powerful. God's tools, though symbolic and like a rod and staff, God's tools are really the grace. It is his Bible, his word that he's given to us. God's tools are other sheep that give us advice and comfort and help. God uses all these things, and the main tool, though, is the Holy Spirit. We need to recognize these as the tools that our great shepherd still uses today. As our praise team makes our way back up, I want us never to forget the presence of God. I want us never to forget what is going on. And yes, we have his provisions. Yes, we have everything that he has promised, and we have all this the solid rock, and we know he's with us. But some of you today may not, you may be going through a dark time, but your eyes may not be upon the shepherd. I'll tell you a story. And it's a story that you may like or may not like. It was a 12-year-old that lost his mother. She died. She was like many mothers, and it was a very poor house, so the mother had to work, but she was the loving and the kind and the gentle. She was a mother that kept the family together, and this 12-year-old lost the mother. And he grew up without a mother figure, but he kept trying to always remember his mother. But as life went along, he started to forget what she looked like. He started to forget her face. And then about 14 years later, in his mid-20s, when he was part of a musical group, he was struggling, and they were doing drugs, and he was going through a dark valley in his life. You can go ahead and strum it. I've asked him to play it softly in the background. And he was crying out one night with insomnia, not knowing what, and his mother showed up to him in a dream or a vision or whatever you want to call it. And he said, I saw her face, and she said these words, "It's going to be okay. Let it be." And he sat down and wrote the words to the song, "Let It Be." Now, we hear that song, we hear Mother Mary called to me, and we often think the Catholic Church and Virgin Mary, but it's not. It was his mother. And this song is haunting. This song is comforting yet scary at the same time. But one of the things that's really haunting to me is, and I get it, let it be, you'll get through this, but this song is not enough. Because this song is just about a dead person showing up, trying to give advice. I'm not talking about the reality of what really happened. I'm just talking about the story behind the song. We can try to let these dark valleys let it be and try to get through it. But our hope is not in things of this world. Our hope is not in advice from people that have died and gone on. We have a hope that is living. We have a hope in a Savior, a shepherd, if you will, that is right there before us. He is in our presence. He is leading us through the dark valleys. He never leaves us alone. And he is a good shepherd that understands and knows the dangers and knows our own foolishness. And he's leading us through. And the challenge I give you is not the words of Paul McCartney's "Let It Be," but it is the words of Phil Wickham's songs that we have a living hope. And the hope that you've got in these dark valleys is this: turn your eyes on him. No matter how dark and how deep it can be, turn your eyes on him. Yea, though I walk through the valley, I will fear no evil. I choose not to fear evil. Why? Because you, God, are with me. Finances are hard. Health issue seems dire. Marriage is crumbling. Work and politics in the world is fighting and hurting and careless. No matter how dark the valley, we've got a God that is light and that is alive. And that is the hope. So this morning, if you need to pray with somebody, I'm down here. But my prayer is, before you walk out of this room, it's this: you know the living hope of Jesus Christ. For you, O God, are with me. Your rod and your staff. Would you stand as we sing this song? And if you need somebody to pray with, if you want to be part of this church, whatever God is leading you to do, I am down here to share with you and pray with you.